Yo, what is up guys? Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that subscribe button, hit the like, all of that good stuff. So, I listened to a video by Unrivaled Boxing Talk and News. By the way, check him out. Essentially, he was responding to another uploader in regards to the topic that Eastern European fighters should not fight in America, and essentially that they should fight in their own backyards to grow the sport in their territories, totally ignoring the fact of, political turmoil and things like that. I mean, just look at the likes of Ukraine. Is it feasible for someone like Alexander Usyk or Vasily Lomachenko to fight in Ukraine right now? Probably not. A lot of security issues and things like that. Ultimately, for Ukrainian fighters in particular, it really isn't feasible right now, to fight in Ukraine. So these guys obviously have to take their trade elsewhere, whether it be the UK, US, Germany, etc. So yeah, the Ukrainian fighters in particular are going to have a hard time fighting in Ukraine. But even like Russian fighters or Croatian fighters, whoever it may be, what's the problem in these guys fighting in the UK or the US or the Western world in general? What's the problem? I don't understand it, because let's be honest, right? If these guys were world champions and they were staying in Eastern Europe defending, a lot of you guys out there would say, well, these guys are home champions. They've not proved it in America. They're not, viable champions because they've not fought in America. That's what a lot of people would be saying if these guys never went to America and fought. A lot of people would be saying that. The same people who are saying the Eastern Europeans should stay in Eastern Europe, they would be saying, well, these guys need to prove themselves in America. So what do you guys want, man? Surely at the end of the day, it should be best fight for best, regardless of where it's at. A lot of these Eastern Europeans are going to the Western world and, they're showing great ambition and fighting top competition. We look at the likes of Alexander Usyk or Vasily Lomachenko or Murodin Akhmadaliev, guys like this, they are showing a desire to fight the best. Who cares where it's at? Let's just cut through the BS. I think the issue here for certain people in America, and it's mainly a lot of these LDBC channels, it's not boxing fans as a whole in America. Most boxing fans in America just want to see the best fights, but a small minority, a lot of these guys, the LDBC, they are terrified that boxing is now a worldwide sport. They're terrified of this fact. They're terrified that we've got people coming from Japan, Eastern Europe, the Ukraine, South America, coming over and having success. That's the problem. As regular boxing fans, that isn't our problem. That's their problem, and that is rooted in deep insecurity that the monopoly no longer exists. Boxing in the US isn't the sport that it once was, and that in itself has been a detriment to US boxing. Obviously, the less popular the sport is, the less world-class fighters you're going to have out of that region, because, kids are not going to take up the sport as regularly. That's just what it is. But it's not only that. It's a combined fact that the US have got weaker in the world of boxing. I think that is true. But also, the rest of the world just caught up. They just caught up. The likes of a lot of these Eastern European countries, a lot of these guys were not allowed to turn pro for a long, long time. It's only been very recently where a lot of these countries enabled their fighters to turn pro. And as a result, we're now seeing more and more talent from these parts of the world, particularly Eastern Europe and sort of Central Asia. We're seeing a lot of talent from these parts of the world. And for a lot of people, obviously that represents change, and they don't like it. They're still living in the past glory days where America dominated boxing. Well, you need to come to the conclusion and accept the fact that it's no longer the case. Boxing's a worldwide sport. It's a worldwide sport. It's still the same sport, still the same rules, we still get great fights, we still have the same entertainment value, but because you can't wave your little flag and identify with certain fighters, then you're getting upset, you're getting insecure. Get over it. The tide is turning, and for the foreseeable future, it's going to be this way for a long, long time. I don't think that's made the sport any better or any worse. It's just the natural cycle of what's going on in boxing. I still love the sport, regardless. There could be 0 British world champions, and I would still love the sport the exact same. I don't give a fuck if a world champion is from the UK. Obviously, I want our scene to be strong, because that obviously cultivates an interest and a fan base, and we get big fights over here. Of course I want the scene to be strong, but even if it wasn't, I would still have the same enthusiasm for boxing as I do now. I mean, I'll put it this way. If I drew up a top 10 list of my favourite fighters right now in 2020, active fighters, I would say one of these guys would be British, and that would be Josh Taylor. So like, one of my top 10 favourite fighters would be British. I don't give a fuck if these guys are from the same neck of the woods that I'm from. And by the way, I'm English. Josh Taylor is Scottish. You know? I don't care about all that stuff. If I see a fighter who I like, who's showing ambition, who's got a great style, who's skillful, etc., etc., I'm going to support him. You know? I'm going to support him. A guy who shows ambition, who fights anybody, who shows balls, who's entertaining. That's what I want to see. That's what I want to see. And that's the reason I'm drawn to a lot of Eastern European fighters, for example, like Akhmadaliev, you know, like Lomachenko, like Alexander Usyk. Because these guys show ambition. They're great to watch. Supporting these guys isn't a crime. You know? I like these sort of fighters. I like guys who show ambition. I like the likes of Michael Hunter, a guy who'll fight anyone, anywhere, anytime. 2 weeks, 3 weeks notice. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see fucking Jamal Charlo turn down a career high payday to fight Demetrius Andrade. I'm not interested. That doesn't make me a fan. That just winds me up. I mean, Naoya Inoue is a good example, actually. For a long time, I was disappointed in Naoya Inoue for basically skipping over the flyweight weight class. And as a result, you know, a lot of fights weren't made. A lot of great fights weren't made. And I was pissed off about that for a long time. But recently, Naoya Inoue's got back in my good books. He's won the World Boxing Super Series, done some great things. I care about who you're fighting. I care about whether you're entertaining me, whether you're giving me good fights. That's all that matters. I'm not going to fucking wave a flag for some cunt who doesn't fight anybody. Do you think I'm waving the flag for Billy Joe Saunders? Just because he's British, I'm going to, you know, cheer this guy no matter what. No, Billy Joe Saunders has done fuck all for a long fucking time. I'm not interested. I'm not going to support that guy just because he's got the same passport as I do. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It's all about the best fight the best. Keep on hearing that phrase. You know, certain people name their channel after that phrase. Yet that person is anti that phrase by being a fanboy and cheering on mediocrity just because somebody looks like him. That's the problem with a lot of boxing fans these days. Far too tribal, far too much fanboyism, cheering for promoters. Embarrassing. Embarrassing. You are part of a problem as far as I'm concerned. You're part of a problem. Complete disgraces, the lot of you. Like I said, I'm not going to cheer on Billy Joe Saunders for fighting Shifat Isafi or that Argentinian dude he last fought. Fuck out of here. I don't want to see those fights. Not interested. I'll get interested in Billy Joe. I'll show excitement in Billy Joe when he fights Golovkin, when he fights Canelo, when he fights Andrade, when he fights Benavidez, Callum Smith, Caleb Plant. That's when I'll get interested. You know? I care about getting good fights. Getting world-class fights between two world-class fighters. That's what I care about. That's what I care about. I'm not scared of boxing becoming a global sport or anything like that. As long as I'm getting a good product, that's all I care about. You know? As long as you're fighting world-class fighters, that's all I care about. I mean, speaking of American fighters, on this channel I've praised someone like Daniel Jacobs a lot. Because look at the guy's last few fights. I know the Chavez Jr. fight was a bit of a gimme, fair enough. But before that, look at his line of fights. He fought 2 pound-for-pound level guys in Canelo Alvarez and Gennady Golovkin, an unbeaten Golovkin. He fought 2 unbeaten dangerous contenders in Sergey Derevyanchenko and Maciej Seletsky. He fought the unbeaten Peter Quillin. This guy was putting in work, fighting people, hence why I've got a lot of admiration for Daniel Jacobs. regardless of where you're from, whether you're from UK, America, Japan, Eastern Europe, Mexico, fucking Timbuktu, wherever you're from, if you're giving me good products, that's all I care about. If you're giving me good fights, that's all I care about. And I've been consistent on that. Why am I going to sit here pretending like Jamal Charlo or Tank Davis are doing great things when they're not? There's no ulterior motive for criticising these sort of guys. You know, these guys are not fighting anybody. So why am I going to put these guys up on a pedestal and praise them to the hilt? Why am I going to do that? If someone like Jamal Charlo was fighting the likes of Andrade, I'll praise him, I'll be interested. But he's not doing that. Same goes for Tank Davis. You know, these guys ain't doing shit, so why am I going to prop these guys up? I understand sometimes in boxing you have to take fights in which aren't always that attractive to fulfill mandatories and things like that. I understand that, but, you know, a lot of these guys aren't showing that ambition to become a great fighter. They're not showing that ambition to create a legacy. Again, why do I like fighters like Juan Francisco Estrada so much? Roman Gonzalez? Because these guys, man, they're putting in work. They want to fight people. And they've got a track record of doing so. Whereas someone like Jamal Charlo and Tank Davis, they don't. You know, so at the end of the day, that's all this is about for me. Best fight the best. I mean, Anthony Joshua is a perfect example. I don't particularly like Anthony Joshua as an individual, but I can't sit here and say his resume sucks. He's actually fought people. He's been involved in fights in which I've actually been interested in. And that's all that matters. Whether you're a fighter in which I don't necessarily like personally, if you're doing good things, I'll say so. It's that simple. You know, everything else is secondary. The only thing that matters is that these fighters show ambition and try to build a resume and fight the best. That's all that matters. I don't want to see guys go through the motion year after year after year like Jamal Charlo. I don't want to see it, man. I'm not interested. But people out here, they want to make it a issue of race, nationalism and things like that. You know, if a guy looks like you, praise him regardless of what he does, who he fights. If a guy's from the same country as you, praise him regardless of what he does and who he fights. That's the attitude amongst a lot of these guys on that side of the street, aka the LDBC. That's the attitude they have. That's not conducive of building the sport and putting pressure on these fights happening. No, that's not at all. That's giving these guys a pass for being mediocre. And I don't want to see that. I want to see all of these guys test themselves, whether I like them or not. If they passed the test, then I'll give them credit. That's all that matters. But on this YouTube shit, that's lost on a lot of people. You know, it's lost on a lot of people, unfortunately. But there we go, what can we say? And again, I want to reiterate, when I say, I think I might have mentioned American fans, the vast majority of American fans just want to see the best fight the best, like me, like most boxing fans. But that small contingent who can't let go of a past, who are terrified of how boxing is going, I would suggest that you guys either leave the sport completely, stop following it, or just embrace it and accept it for what it is. That's my advice to you guys, honestly. Because you guys, man, you do nothing but spread toxicity and negativity within this community. I know I troll you guys at times because it is funny. You know, you guys are a cancer as far as I'm concerned, so I may as well have a laugh, but this one's a bit more serious. I genuinely think you guys are doing a disservice to the boxing scene online. You're doing a disservice as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, Eastern Europeans shouldn't fight in America. Complete nonsense. Ultimately, the mega bucks are in America, so these guys are going to gravitate towards America still. And, you know, a lot of these guys in the meantime are still requesting great fights. They're still showing ambition. So what's the problem? Like I said, we know what the alternative would be. If these Eastern European fighters did fight in Eastern Europe and they stayed there exclusively, we know what the criticism would be. Oh, these guys just stay at home, they don't travel, they don't fight in America. That is what the criticism would be. Let's just be honest. So, Listen, boxing's a global sport, whether you like it or not. It's going to continue to be that way for quite some time. And it's only going to shift further in the global direction. So accept it and embrace it, or just leave the sport entirely. Just that simple, you know. You'll do yourself a bigger favour in regards to your mental health and your happiness, because a lot of people take this very seriously, you know. They have a lot of pride within their fighters who look like them. And once these numbers start to diminish, when there's less of these fighters to support, you know, these guys are they're just going to get more and more angry. So if you're one of those people, just leave the sport, man. Follow the NFL or something like that, because boxing might not be for you anymore. Just that simple. Peace.